Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on the show tonight. We have a special program ready for you. We have Patrick Davis on the show, and we have an extensive interview with him tonight. He really has one of the most outstanding testimonies of coming to Christ that I personally know about. It didn't happen with a preacher. It didn't happen at a church. It didn't happen in the streets. And I want you to hear this testimony by Patrick Davis. But sit back, relax. I'm your host, Nate Freeman, and this is Godspeak. Okay, today our thought of the day is, what are you wearing? And we're going to be coming out of 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 28. Now, I really challenge you to read the whole chapter of 1 Samuel chapter 17. But I'm dropping down to verse 28 to get into the actual lesson here. Now to set the scene, David. Now, some of you, when I set out the title, what are you wearing? I'm not talking about, how short your skirt might be or how tight your pants are. That's not what. That's a whole nother show and another issue. And I'm not going to be a clothesline preacher tonight. But I do want to talk about what are you wearing in the sense of the anointing of God and talking about the armor of God. So here we have the Goliath, and if you read the beginning of 1 Samuel 17, Goliath is a giant that's in the land. He was set. And the Philistines were set against the army of Israel. And so David had been at the site. He went back to tend to the sheep. He found somebody to sit with the sheep, and his father sent him to bring food to his three older brothers who were already down, getting ready to do battle. Now we're going to start with verse 28. And Eliahab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left thy few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride in the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. Now, what you have to realize is at this point, David is down there. He was sent by his father. And now you have to remember, Eliab and the other brothers already knew that Samuel had anointed David to be king over Israel. There was a giant in the land. They all were afraid. Israel was afraid because they didn't know what was going to happen next, because this giant looked too big for anybody to overcome. And so David was trying to find out what was going on with the battle. What did this giant want? And so when now we know the end of the story. We know that David, kids from the age of 4 on up hear the story of David and Goliath. Well, the thing is that we know that David was the one that was going to slay the giant that was in the land. And the thing that you need to realize is that when God has called you to do something, when God has called you to slay giants, the giant of demons that are holding people back from the promise that God has for them, when God is about to use you to tear down the thing that everybody else is afraid of, people are going to come against you. It said that Eliab's anger was kindled against David. His own brother, and what he told him, what Eliab told him was, the first thing people want to tell you that are closest to you, they want to tell you what you should be doing. He told him, you should be with your sheep. You should be doing this. Well, all the while, David had that all under control, and he was there under assignment, not only from our father up in heaven, but by his earthly father Jesse. But let's read further here in verse 29. It says, and David said, what have I done? Is there not a cause? You know, this giant was in the land, and somebody needed to take that giant down. It said he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. So now David was going amongst the people saying, who is this uncircumcised Philistine to come against us? Well, his words get up to the king. So Saul now David says to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. It says, and I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. So here, what we need to realize, and what we could learn by this, is that David, he remembered when he overcame the bear and the lion, he remembered those things, and he said, the same way that this giant is coming against us is the same way that I will kill the giant that's in the land. And the thing is then next what happens is that the king, that Saul, wants to give David armor. He's telling David, this is how you're going to protect yourself, and this is how you're going to kill the giant. Well, when David puts on that armor and goes to walk in it, because he wasn't familiar with the armor, David said, I can't wear this, and I'm going to go back to what I know. I'm going to go back to, and the thing is that you need to realize, because see, I believe that 2012 is a year of transition for a lot of people. God's about to take you into a place that you've never been before. God's about to take you to another level in him. God's about to raise you up to do great exploits in his name. And when you're getting ready to do those things, there will be people who are not assigned by God to speak into your life, but people who will want to give you advice. They'll want to put their armor on you and tell you, this is the way you do it. And that's the way you do it. And the thing is that while there's always something to learn from our elders, and there's always something to learn from those who've gone before us, the thing is that we can't leave the thing that got us to where we're at. And what David did is he took his staff, he took his staff, and he went down, and it said that he picked up 5 smooth stones, and he slew that giant with 5 smooth stones. Now, what that tells me is that those stones had been weathered. Since they were smooth, that means water had run over them. They were smooth they had been through the elements that were in the earth. They had been through storms. They had been through they were at a foundation there, there in the valley. And what God is telling me, and what He wanted me to share with you today, was that when you're going to face that giant, you need to stand on these 5 smooth stones. In the first stone that He wants us to do is that we need to read the Word. First, you got to read the Word. You got to know where the Word. You need to read the Word and get that into your spirit. But not only do we need to read the Word, but the second smooth stone is that we need to study the Word. See, it's not good enough just to read it, but we have to understand what it's saying. We have to understand what the Word of God is saying about our situation. And we always have to apply the Word to our life. After we study the Word we read the word, we study the word, we need to start speaking that word. So let the poor say I am rich. Let the weak say I am strong. You have to say something. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So you have to speak the word. You have to speak what God is saying. You have to speak. You have to get your body, your mind, your will, and your emotions in line with your spirit and speak what it is that God's saying when you're facing a giant. The third thing is, after you speak the word, you have to pray the word. You can't pray that prayer, God, if it be thy will, maybe if you have time to step away from taking care of the whole world, and if you could just have a few moments to entertain me. No, Jesus said that it is the will, it is my will that you be healed. It is the will of the Father that he heals you. It is his will. So you have to pray the will of God. You can't pray doubt and unbelief, but you can't pray the word if you don't read the word, and if you don't study the word, and if you're not speaking that word. And then the last thing you need to do, the fifth smooth stone, is that you need to live the word. You know, the Bible says that bless those who curse you. You know, it says bless those who hate you. I mean, it's easy to bless that person that loves on you every day. It's easy to bless that person that feeds you. It's easy to bless the love, but God's called us to love the unlovely. And now it doesn't mean you got to like everybody. You know, the Bible doesn't say to like everybody, but it says that we have to love them. Some people you might have to love at a distance because they may rub, you being in their presence all the time may get you out of being who you need to be in him. But you still got to walk in love. You still got to walk in the love that the Father has for you. And if you want to be promoted to what God is calling you to do, you need to stand on what got you there. Well, like I said, tonight we have a great interview lined up for you. But before we go into that interview, I just want to talk to you real quick about our website. And a lot of people have contacted us and said, I didn't get to see the live show, and I missed the show while it was on the front of the website. How do I see the other show? So you'll see on your screen there, you click on the video link to the left-hand side of the screen, and it will take you to all of the God Speak episodes. You'll see that being displayed on the screen. So we're excited to finally have the myth, the legend, Patrick Davis finally on the show. We've been talking about it, and I know you last week there was a problem with the video where we couldn't hear his voice, but we got all that rectified, and we finally got him on the show. So I just first want to say welcome to Patrick, and thank you for taking the time to join us here tonight.
Definitely, man. Glad to be here.
Okay, great. So before we get into the projects that you're working on and the places that you've been singing and the concerts and that, I first, as far as personally knowing somebody's testimony, I think that you have one of the most powerful testimonies that I've heard. And if you could just, it probably could take up the rest or the whole half hour, but if you could just share with the audience real quick about your testimony, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, wow, you can go so many with that. I would say, man, the main thing is, I never definitely would have thought that I would be, believing in Jesus or really any of that stuff. I grew up in one of the poorest cities in America, a city by the name of Cleveland. And if you're not familiar with Northeast Ohio, Cleveland right now actually has a poverty rate of, in some areas, 30% people are unemployed. And so, if you're not familiar with the area, it's really hard to wrap your mind around, what parts of the city can be like unless you've actually been here, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I grew up in one of the worst parts of that city. It's an area called Slavic Village. I grew up, unfortunately, like, this story is common with a lot of people my age and a lot of people, that grew up in that neighborhood. And, I grew up without a dad. I grew up kind of, struggling and not really knowing who I was and just dealing with that whole thing. When I was I would say about 5 years old, my father, he cheated on my mother, and he gave her an STD, and that was how she found out. So, real standard guy, you know what I mean? And so basically, I can hear you now, by the way, so I'll shut the phone off. Yeah, man. So basically, because of that, my father cheated on my mother. He left, and he basically pretty much disappeared out of our lives. There was 5 of us. It was me. I have 2 older brothers, and then a younger brother and a younger sister. And pretty much what happened was he abandoned us. He left us, and I think your family, like, is so important, man. Like, I think both your father and your mother, or if it's your grandmother, or I don't know, maybe you live with a cousin or something like that. But I think, man, no matter what that family unit looks like, it's so important that you have that. And I think that something happens when you have that, and it's as it should be. And so, yeah, I grew up without that not being as it should be, and so I didn't know who I was, man. I grew up trying to fit in, trying to, look for, direction and guidance. And, all that really was in that neighborhood was drug dealers and criminals. And so, over time, I kind of ended up getting wrapped up in that whole lifestyle, really. And, started off small and, started smoking cigarettes behind the school, you know what I mean? Like, busting windows after school, we used to flip these newspaper machines over and steal all the quarters out to go buy candy, like stupid stuff like that. And yeah, it just gets worse, man, and so because I didn't know who I was, like, things happen, man. You get sucked into this whole mentality around you. And so, yeah, man, I found myself getting involved in drugs at a young age, stealing cars, robbing people at gunpoint. And, they were basically, those kind of people were my role models. They were people I looked up to, and my dad wasn't there. And so, but at the same time, I don't want to blame who I am today on my dad. Because if there's anything that I think is messed up in the hood, is like people love blaming other people for their problems. You know what I mean? Right. And I'm not saying there hasn't been some foul stuff that's happened to me and other people, maybe people watching this. But I think the first step to freedom, man, is acknowledging that, look, man, I made those decisions. It wasn't somebody else. You know what I mean? Right. Like, yeah, there were surrounding issues behind that. But, man, it was me, And so, I found myself selling drugs. I started selling crack cocaine. And I got wrapped up in this lifestyle. And eventually I ended up in a situation where I owed a drug dealer about $7,000. And basically the way the drug system works is you establish a relationship, if you will, with a supplier. They front you the dope that you're selling, and then when you sell it, you give them their cut, And so what happened was I was making all this money, and my drugs disappeared. Like, he gave me this huge, massive thing of drugs, and they disappeared. And I joke around today, but I tell people God is a thief. He stole my drugs. and so, I found myself in this situation, man, where, this guy, I owed him all this money. He basically wanted to kill me. He wanted to take my life. And so I remember getting ran off the road at one point. He's pulling a gun out on me. I could go on and on and on. This is like, for some people, they hear this, they've heard it a million times. Like, I definitely am not one of those dudes that, like, I want to shock people with my story. To me, like, that was real life. There was nothing glamorous about it. There was nothing fun about it. Like, man, that stuff sucked. I remember walking out of my house and not knowing if somebody's going to blow my head off. There's nothing fun about it, But I found myself in a situation where this dude was looking for me. He was going to every house I was at, and I was just barely missing him. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, like, look, like, there's 2 things I can do. Either I can get a gun and I can shoot him, or I can get out of town. And so I devised this scheme where, I'm just going to get a gun. I'm going to rob him at gunpoint. I'm going to rob somebody at gunpoint, and basically just get enough money to get out of town. Because at that point in my life, like as messed up as I wasn't ready to kill somebody, man. And so basically, I ended up robbing somebody at gunpoint when I was 16 years old, and I got caught, and I got arrested, and the robbery kind of went bad, and I ended up in a situation where I kidnapped 5 people, and basically was holding them at gunpoint, and it's just nuts, man, And so yeah, I get arrested. They catch me on the scene, and I end up going to juvenile prison, and basically was faced with 45 years in the penitentiary for 5 counts of kidnapping and aggravated robbery. And so I found myself in this place where like my whole world pretty much came crashing down. Just when I thought things couldn't get crazier, I'm sitting in prison. I'm waiting to see how much time I'm going to get, to see, the way the law works here in Ohio. And I think this is pretty true across America. Basically, what happens is if you commit a serious crime or a crime, involving a gun or something like that, like they will try you as an adult. So even though I was 16 years old, they would still basically send me to an adult penitentiary for my crime. And yeah, man. So I'm waiting to be tried, and I get the news that my brother Larry, he was the second oldest to me. I get the news that he went out the night before, and he had got into an argument and a fight inside of a club in downtown Cleveland, and he got in a scuffle with this guy, and the guy pulled out a knife and stabbed him 8 times. And yeah, my brother died, man. He bled to death. And my best friend was walking ahead of my brother and didn't realize the scuffle and all the kind of stuff that was happening. He just saw my brother on the ground, and so he runs back to check on my brother, and he doesn't know this guy has a knife. The guy pulls the knife out on him and stabs him in the heart. And, he was my age at the time. He was 16, and he's blind and paralyzed to this day. And so, yeah, it's nuts, man. Like, and this is the thing, like, I guess I just want to say this, like, when it comes to testimonies and stories or whatever you want to call them, like, for me, like, this story is, like, it's more than a testimony. You know what I mean? Like, and I know you know that because we know each other, but, like, just for the viewers, like, your testimony isn't just, like, something you get up and you share in church. Man, this is your life. You know what I mean? Like, that was my brother. Like, this is serious stuff. And with your testimony or whatever it is, your story, whatever you want to call it, like, I just want to encourage you, man, like, that thing doesn't end. Like, just when you find Jesus, like, the story doesn't end. And so keep telling the story, not just the dramatic, I just want to put that in there, Right. And so, yeah, so my brother gets murdered, man, and I'm sitting in prison. I didn't get to go to the funeral, didn't see him buried, like, just completely, words can't describe the type of pain that I felt in that cell. Because my dad wasn't there when I was growing up, dude, my brother was my hero. Like, he was the one that taught me how to throw a baseball. He was the one that was there for me. And for me, the hardest thing to accept was that here I was, this dude that was, like, kidnapping and robbing people and selling crack cocaine, and I'm in prison, and my brother, who was, like, he was an athlete. He played baseball. Like, he had a potential professional baseball contract, and he gets murdered in the streets and had no police record. You know what I mean? And so, like, that injustice, like, man, that injustice really, like, kept me in a bad place. And I know that there's a lot of people watching this, and there's a lot of people in the world that they've suffered injustice, man. They've had foul things happen to them. And so, that nagging question comes up, well, hey, if God was really cared, then why would he allow this? And man, look, I went through that. I identify with that. And I just want to say there's just some things that suck in life, and you're never going to have an answer for them. To this day, like, the dude that stabbed my brother, he's a police officer. He never did a day in jail. He was acquitted. He didn't do any time. His family spent close to $1 million on a lawyer and basically paying my brother to be a criminal and thug because of where we lived, and never did time. And so I suffered an injustice, man. And, I deserved to be in prison. But, man, going through that, like, it just wrecked me. And I remember freaking out, trying to fight all the guards. They put me in this thing called the box. It's basically solitary confinement. It's a nice way to say solitary confinement. It's not a nice little box. It's a it's a cell with no windows. They stripped me down naked, took the mattress out, took my clothes out because I was on suicide watch. And I sat there for 2 weeks, man, solitary confinement. And something crazy happened to me inside of that cell. I don't think I ever, like, I'm convinced that, like, God is speaking to people every day, but I think the only difference is, like, some of us hear it and some of us don't. You know? Like, I'm convinced even the dude that's, like, sitting in the crack house right now, smoking right now, as we're filming this thing, there's somebody out there that's getting high right now, like, inside of a drug house somewhere. I believe that God is speaking to those people, too. And I don't believe that people have to go to church to hear that. And for the first time in my life, like as I'm sitting in that cell, I start to hear like this voice. And me and my friend, we even wrote a song about it. It's called "The Voice Beyond Reason." And the idea is like, man, like there is this voice that is like reverberating throughout the earth. You know, it's going, it's speaking, it's talking. It's not audible. You don't hear it. You don't hear it in your ears, but it's like this voice that like goes. It doesn't speak to you, but it speaks through you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Revelation.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Now, up until this point, you've never graced the doors of a church, or you had no church upbringing. Is that correct? Or
no, I wasn't really raised in church. Wasn't really familiar with it. At one time, my grandmother tricked me to go to church. I thought I was going to a funeral because that's what I associated churches with. Right. There's a whole other sermon. But yeah, man, she tricked me into going, and I had drugs on me, had a gun on me. Like, I went. They did some kind of response time. I ran down there, told them I had drugs and a gun. They freaked out, But other than that, man, like, yeah, I had no background. It was all gibberish to me, man. It was Pig Latin. And yeah, so I didn't have any background, but like I said, back to that voice, like, I don't believe that you need to be like in a church to hear that voice. Like, that's the most amazing thing about Jesus. If you even look at the life of Christ, like the majority of what he did, it didn't happen inside of the temple. It didn't happen inside of the religious. In fact, the only time he went to those places was when he was going to like braid some whips and flip some tables, and tell people how messed up they were. But he was out with the people, He was hanging out, man. He was known as a tax collector, he was known as a friend of sinners and a wine bibber and, some shady dude, a sinner. He had a reputation. I think he had a reputation because he hung out with those people so much. And so I found myself sitting in prison in this place where most people, if you would say, hey, what is the most godforsaken place? Well, anyone that's been to prison would tell you, man, the most godforsaken place is being locked up and being isolated. And so I'm sitting in this cell, and I begin to hear this voice. And like I said earlier, it wasn't like I was hearing it audibly, but, Revelations talks about, it describes Jesus, and it uses all this, like, this imagery. And, the guys that wrote the Bible, they were mostly Jewish Eastern people, and they wrote in symbolism, and they wrote in imagery and poetry. And they talk about Jesus having eyes of fire. And it's not that, like, look, man, when we see Jesus, like, he's going to have, like, candle flames flickering in his eyes. But it was a way of saying, no, dude, when you look at this dude and you see his eyes, man, his eyes, like, they don't just look at you, but they look through you, And that's kind of how that voice was, and it just began to, like, speak through me. And, there's another verse that it says that everything is laid bare and naked before him with whom we have to do. And basically what that's saying in layman's terms is it's saying, man, when God looks at you, when those eyes of fire look at you, when that voice speaks to you, like, it has a way of cutting through all the nonsense and really speaking to the deepest part of who you are. And it was crazy, man. Like, it was wild. I thought I was having some kind of drug, like, relapse, some kind of flashback. I used to love popping acid. I thought I was having an acid flashback. But, man, like, it was so, like, real and so liberating. And so, like, I just began to weep, and I began to hear God, like, speak to me, telling me, hey, man, like, dude, I've been following you your whole life. I love you. And I tell, like he said a lot of things to me during that time, but those words stuck with me, where I love you. And it wasn't in the shallow sense of, hey, I love you because you can do this for me, or I love you if you behave, or I love you, because your behavior has matched what I think it should be. But it was like, no, dude, like, I see you, I know everything you've done, I know all the stuff that's happened in your life, I still love you. And like, I don't know about you, but like that verse, while we were sinners, Christ died for us, and that he, at the culmination of the ages, Jesus came, and he didn't come. It says he came when we were weak and powerless. We couldn't save ourselves. You know what I mean? And like, to know that the gravity of what I've done, and forget the crimes, and this is the thing I think where we miss the point. I'm not just saying all the crime and all that kind of visible stuff, but man, he knew like my thoughts. You know what I mean? Like, he knew like my motives. He knew like my intentions, and he still loved me. And when he said it, like, I actually believed it. And I never had someone say that to me in my life and actually believe that they meant it. And so I remember just weeping, and I remember being out. I'll never forget it, man. I remember being on my knees in the cell. It was the middle of winter, it's snowing outside, it's kind of cold in there, and it was like somebody came into my cell and they put like one of those heating blankets over me, and not only did they put the blanket over me, but like I felt like somebody was hugging me. And, this sounds like a real nice, motivational, inspiring story, but I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in prison, if somebody puts a blanket on you, like, that's not a good thing, Like, and it was, and I kid you not, like, that's a real thing. Like it was so real to me, and I sensed, like, the reality of that so much that I jumped up. I was like, whoa, like, what in the world is going on? I thought somebody stuck into my cell, was trying to put a blanket over me and beat me down. Like, that's what happens in prison, Right. And I looked, and there was nothing there, And I can't say, for my whole, walk in my relationship with God that I've had those kind of moments every day, because I haven't. It just doesn't work that way. But the reality is, like, that's what I needed at that time. And I needed to know that, like, hey, like, I have not forgotten you, even though society has written you off, even though people have given up on you, even though you're locked inside of the cell, you can't go to your brother's funeral, and you have no idea if you're ever even going to get out of prison. I want you to know that I love you, and I have not given up on you. And that just, it rocked my world, man. My mother came to see me about 2 weeks later. She thought I was high because she saw a visible change in my face. And so I had this thing happen. I hear this voice, and I spent the last 13 years of my life trying to listen to that voice, and it's taken me places and shown me things about life that I never dreamed were even possible. To kind of wrap the story up, I end up going to court, and I knew this voice was real. I knew this experience I had was real. I knew that Jesus was alive. I knew that he loved me, and he hadn't given up on me. And I knew that moment was real. And so I prayed, man, before I went to court. And I said, look, I know that you are what I need. I don't have all the answers. I have more questions than answers. I don't even know what to do with just what happened to me in that cell. But God, I want you to know that, like, even if they give me 45 years, like, I will follow you. Like, I never want to spend another day of my life not hearing that voice. Right. And so I go to court that day. I opened the Bible, and it was 1 John, and it talks about how we have an advocate. Jesus is our advocate. An advocate is a way of saying almost like a lawyer, Right. And so, dude, I go in the courtroom. The judge, I had one of the most strict judges for those violent crimes. And she said to me, I don't know why we're doing this, but Patrick, I'm going to keep you in the juvenile system. And that meant I could only do a maximum of 4 years in juvenile prison. And not only that, but when I got out, I wouldn't have an adult record. And so, yeah, I only did 4 years, man. And it's shocking.
What an awesome testimony. I mean, there was, no man could take credit for what happened to you in that cell, but God alone getting the glory. And I just think that's so powerful that he showed up in that capacity to you, and and I know you personally, and I know you to walk and follow that voice, and so it's just an awesome thing to hear again and to share with the viewers. Um, the other thing that we don't really have much time left today, but we definitely will have you back on the show. Um, if you would just share maybe your website, some of the things that maybe you have coming up, and then we'll go ahead and end the interview from there.
Definitely, man. Thanks, bro. Yeah, you can find, I'm a musician. I do music now, and I go around pretty much all over the world. I teach, I do music, I do live hip-hop, and then I do teaching. You can check out the music, some sermons, and things like that on a website. It's just patrickdavis.net. It's just, again, it's my name, Patrick Davis, DAVIS.net. That has concert dates, all that kind of stuff. We just got back from a 6-week tour in Australia, and in April we're going to the United Kingdom. So anybody in the United Kingdom, check us out. We'll be there April 10th to May 10th. And yeah, we just finished a new tour up. It's called In the Face of Mountains, and that's kind of the presentation that we're doing on the tour. And it's basically like this multimedia presentation, almost like a production. And I use everything from the story of Plato's Cave to, clips from The Matrix to live music to, teachings of Jesus. And it's like this fluid, mixture of visual art, sermon, live music. And that's pretty much what we're doing now. And then that's pretty much it right now. I know it's a lot. It's not pretty much it. That's it.
Right. Now, I always ask our guests to share a scripture that has either impacted their life or ministry, which you've done that already. But I guess today what I really want you to do is that young person that's out there, that person that is looking to hear that voice that you heard, or maybe somebody's just out there that for some reason they clicked online and saw this show, or heard this interview somehow. What would you say to that one person? What would you tell that one person?
Wow. Well, the first thing I would say is if there's anything I think that's missing in society, just in general, man, whether it's music or it's art or it's Jesus and the church, I think we've lost the ability to think for ourselves. And what I mean by that is there's a verse that says, wide is the road or wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and there's many that will find it, but narrow is the way that leads to life, and small is the gate, and there's few that find it. And I used to think that just meant all those those people out there that don't believe what I believe, they're the wide road. But I'm coming to realize, man, there's a lot of religious people, they think they have it figured out. And I think there's a lot of people out there that the reason that they want nothing to do with Jesus is because they've seen all this stuff that is associated with Jesus that is just toxic. And what I would tell that person that really does want to know what's real and what's life and where the life's at and where the water's at, I would say, man, first of all, start thinking for yourself. Don't just accept my word for it. As a matter of fact, I don't want you to just believe my word. I want what I say, I don't want it to be water to you, but I want it to be salt to you. And I want you to become so thirsty that you have to go find the water for yourself. Because I believe if you find it for yourself, there's something real that happens. And so, yeah, think for yourself. Search for yourself. And Jesus promised, man, if you seek me with all of your heart, you will find me. If you seek, you will find. If you knock, the door will be open. If you ask, it will be given. And so, in the whole tradition and the life and the way of Jesus, he constantly invites people. Man, don't blindly accept what I'm telling you. Don't just blindly accept what some teacher tells you on TV. Dude, taste it. Try it for yourself, man. Ask. If there's things that are bothering you and you don't see things line up, that's okay. Jesus is not afraid of your questions. And so that's what I would tell people, man, is Jesus isn't afraid of your questions. In fact, Jesus was known for his wisdom when he was 12 years old, not for his answers, but for his questions. And I think there's something powerful when we can begin to ask ourselves, and that goes back to thinking for yourself and thinking freely, is we can ask ourselves those hard questions about ourselves and about God and who is Jesus. Not who do my friends say, not even who do religious people say, but who is he? Who is he to me? You know? So that's what I would say, and it's like, look, don't take our word for it, bro. Like, taste that thing. Don't take a bite of that hamburger. You know what I mean? Take a sip of the drink, you know? Go eat a piece of popcorn. Tell me if it's good or not. Maybe it's not, but there's not a good piece in there, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, I hope that makes sense, man.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, hey, we thank Patrick Davis for being on the show. Check out his website, patrickdavis.net. We look forward to hearing from you again, maybe before you head out to the UK or maybe shortly after you get back. But we thank you once again for taking the time to be on the show, and you have a good night, Patrick.
You too, man. Thanks. Good seeing you, bro.
Okay, you too.
Take care.
Okay, I knew that video was, our interview was a little bit longer than normal, but I want to thank everybody for listening. That's just one of the most powerful testimonies I personally know of. I just want to remind everybody, next month, every Tuesday night next month, we're going to be teaching on the steps of the Hebrew blood covenant and how that relates to your covenant with God through the blood of Jesus Christ. So thank you for being on the show, and have a great rest of the week. God bless.